Good morning. My name is Jeff Dorr. I'm the Chief Customer Officer here at Airstream. I want to welcome those of you joining us today for our second part of the Planning for Recovery series here at Airstream. A couple of things before we kick off with the panel. For those of you who are part of the food service and Airstream community, just want to again thank you for all the feedback and support over the past few months as we continue to innovate and work together during this time and prepare for the future. What I want to cover off today on the agenda, so again, as like last time, 4 weeks ago, we committed to do these once a month. So we will talk through our Planning for Recovery series. We have an agenda that we will cover, and we have a great panel lined up for you today. So the agenda today is going to consist of an update on our resource center. I will introduce the panel members. David Maloney is going to give a state of the industry update. We will then jump to our panel discussion, which is around considerations for reopening and beyond. And then, as we always do, we will take the audience Q&A. Just a side note that if you were dialed in through your GoToMeeting, you actually have a comment section down there to the bottom right of it, where you can post a question for us. Our marketing team will take those and they'll actually pass them to me while we do this. So let's talk a little bit about Airstream and what we're doing and continue to do for our industry. So we still have our COVID resource response center that is posted. We continue to load industry and Airstream data into that, as well as publishing commodity and market trends as they're related to the crisis. That is free and continues to be free for everyone right now. So please check out our website as we continue to post a lot of information up there on a weekly basis. We also have some exciting news about a new product release coming out in the next couple of weeks, which I'll discuss a little bit further towards the end of this town hall. So now I'd like to introduce Airstream for those of you who may not know us. Just a brief overview of what we do. For over 20 years now, Airstream has powered the food service industry in purchasing, supply chain, and QA teams with a comprehensive software solution that helps companies that are similar to the ones on the panel today have quicker access to data, manage your cost of goods sold, and operate supply chain teams more efficiently. Our key areas of focus are distributor inventory visibility, pricing, product compliance, spend analytics, supplier and product sourcing, commodity intelligence, which is through American Restaurant Association, and quality incident management. Our connected marketplace now comprises of more than 200 operators, over 1,000 distribution points, and close to 7,500 food service suppliers. This crisis has obviously continued to highlight that supply chain data and information is more critical than ever. The data and statistics that are from our customers that we're collecting now show that by leveraging our technology and having this critical data at your fingertips has put them ahead of the curve in terms of preparedness for inventory, store restarts, substitution and visibility issues, audits of the substitutions and variances, as well as the management of product through QA at the store level, which is now being elevated more than ever. So again, just a little bit about Airstream, but mostly we're super excited to have this panel today, which consists of all customers. So we're very grateful that they've decided to participate today, and I think they're giving us some great insight. So with that, let me introduce each one. I'd like to start with Megan Shearer of Shake Shack. Good morning, Megan. Would you like to give a background on yourself and a little bit about Shake Shack?
Good morning. I'm Megan Shearer. I'm the Senior Supply Chain Manager at Shake Shack. I oversee our supply chain throughout the U.S. across our 20 distribution centers. I've been with the company for about 4.5 years now.
Great, thanks, Megan. I'd like to also introduce Brian Cohn with George's.
Yeah, Jeff, I'm Brian Cohen. I'm the SVP of Food Service at George's. We're a fourth generation family-owned food company with 8 facilities in 4 states, mostly concentrating on chicken.
Excellent, thank you. Appreciate you being with us today. I'd like to also introduce Keith Anderkin with ARCOP.
Hi, good morning. Keith Anderkin, Senior Vice President of Procurement and Supply Management for ARCOP. We are the supply chain cooperative supporting the Arby's brand in the United States, so about 3,300 locations. And I head up the team over what we call our direct procurement, so all the food, beverage, packaging side of the equation, as well as our supply management team doing forecasting and promotion management activity. And look forward to the webinar.
Thanks, Keith. Appreciate you being with us today. Also like to introduce Kevin Walker with PFG. Good morning, Kevin.
Hi. Good morning, good afternoon. Kevin Walker. I'm VP of Corporate Sales for Performance Foodservice, which is part of PFG. Over the umbrella of PFG, includes the broadline side, which is Performance Foodservice, and Reinhardt Foodservice, which we closed on in December of this past year. We also have a customized division that services the U.S. and a retail sort of C-store distribution side called E.B. Brown, and through our Vistar division. So right now we're the second largest distributor in the U.S. Good to be here. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us today. I'd also like to introduce David Maloney, who most of you may know. David's our EVP of Analytics here at Airstream. Morning, David.
Morning, Jeff. Thanks for having me. For those of you who don't know me, I had a company called American Restaurant Association that was acquired by Airstream in June of 2018, and happy to be here.
Great, thank you. So again, thank you all for joining today. We're looking forward to a great session. We are going to start like we always do with Mr. Maloney, and he is going to give a state of the industry. One of the things that David is doing now is not only pulling ARA data and industry data, but we're starting to look at some Airstream data as well. So he's going to cover on some of that. So David, we'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. So I think, today, obviously, I do want to spend a little bit of time on commodities, but particularly with the heightened attention it's gotten over the last couple of days with John Tyson putting out that op-ed over the weekend. This is the Airstream Restaurant Commodity Index. This is a basket of commodities weighted for the industry that we measure. And you could see just the extreme volatility that we've seen over the last couple of months. Markets surging towards the end of March with the retail surge in demand, and then as supplies rebalanced, the markets crashed. And now we're starting to see them go up again. And I'm sure what's on everybody's mind is these protein production shortfalls. To give you some perspective, beef production last week was down 25% year on year. That's a huge number. Throughout the first 10, 12 weeks of this year, we were up about 5-6%. Pork production was down 15% last week, year on year. To give you some perspective, we were up about 6-7% during the first 12 weeks of this year, so that's a big shift. The week didn't start off very well. Monday, hog and cattle slaughter were both down about 32% year on year. So several problems occurring. You've got COVID issues, you've got absenteeism. And from what we're hearing, probably the worst of this is going to last about 4 to 6 weeks, but make no mistake, there are going to be problems or challenges thereafter. Probably what we're hearing, the best case scenario is that the industry can get to about 90% of capacity in about 3 months. And we'll have to see what happens there. There's going to be some adjustments on the lines, the fabrication lines. That's where the real challenges are. The goal, or what we're hoping for, is about 90% over the next 3 months, at the end of 3 months, if you will. We're going to see some volatility, particularly on prices and supplies, probably at least for the next couple of months. And we're having the restaurants open, so commodities are going to be tricky, if you will. We are concerned longer term. We're concerned about the farmers and producers here that have lower prices for their animals or their crops. We think that probably tempers production as we get into 21, and so that's something, and probably 22 is something we're going to have to certainly keep an eye on. But the good news for the restaurant industry is that states are starting to reopen, right? And so this next slide has a map of our COVID-19 status map. That what we did is we had numerous clients coming to us and they said, look, we don't even know where to start. Like, where is the industry going to open, right? And how do we plan our supply chain? How do we plan labor? So what we did is we used data from the COVID tracking project, testing data by state, and then we basically ranked the states based on about 7 or 8 different inputs. And what you need to know is the lighter the color, the better the ranking. So it makes sense that Hawaii and Alaska would rank very high, right? You notice that some of these states have an orange outline. That orange outline signifies that they have dine-in open or will have dine-in open during the next week. You notice there's 6 states there, I believe. The big catch, if you will, is Texas. Kevin will like that, right? Texas is the largest market, accounts for about 9.3% of annual restaurant sales. As we dig into the states further on the next slide, you'll see Texas there right in the middle. This is the top 25 states, how they rank. Alaska ranking number 1 to Louisiana ranking number 25. How they rank as of this morning, that's as of yesterday's COVID data. You can see that the good news, we have 4 major markets in the United States that account for about 37% of annual restaurant sales. California, New York, Florida, and Texas. The good news is 3 of those states are in here, and you may think, well, New York, how is New York in the top 25 with all negative news? Based on the data, New York has been climbing sharply higher in the ranking model. So it's very good news, not only for New York, but also for the restaurant industry. We see New York climb quite a bit, where other states, perhaps a couple of weeks ago, that were in the top 15 or so have slid, states like Minnesota, if you will. But the good news, like I said, we've got 3 major states in here. Those account for almost a quarter of annual restaurant sales. With these restrictions, I mean, this is a good first step. I think a good test as we move forward. Next slide has a map of, as we move forward, I got a little ahead of myself there. As we move forward, something to consider is that those who are more susceptible to complications from COVID may be slower to return. And so what we did with our friends with Technomic is we looked at, age demographics across the restaurant space. And as far as those 65 and older, that represents about 19% of annual restaurant traffic, which quite honestly surprised us. And you can see that amongst the different restaurant segments, that it's spaced out pretty well. I mean, they're very similar, right? Very similar. If you drop down to 55 and older, okay, now we're talking about 35, 36% of annual restaurant sales. So I don't want to be a Debbie Downer, but I suspect that, yes, we're gonna have a slow open to restaurants and we're excited about that. But as we get fully opened, it wouldn't surprise me if these demographics are a little later to the party, if you will. Lastly, I have a map here that will be available to our clients in AeroStream in the coming weeks for them to look at their network and purchases across their supply chain and their restaurants by county across the country. This is our entire network spend, so all the 200 plus brands that are in our network. And this is the first 2 full weeks of April compared to the prior 2 weeks. And what you need to know here is green is good, red is not good, and peach is okay. And basically, where you see with green is that their purchases from distributors were up rather considerably during the first 2 weeks of April compared to the prior 2 weeks. And, there's only a few smatterings of red here. What's interesting to me is you can see that it really looks like the Northeast and the Midwest, which have been hit pretty hard from COVID, really did rebound. And that's what we're hearing from some of our customers. And I think you'll hear some of that today. Also interested to see here the Northwest rebounding over the first couple of weeks of April. Again, this map will be available to our clients so they can look at their own network in the coming weeks, which we're very excited about as one of our new offerings. And with that, Jeff, we'll turn it over to the panel.
Great. Thanks, David. Appreciate that. So So let's move on to the panel now and dig into what's been going on for the past few weeks and what does the next month look like for everyone. I think this is great. Listen, first, thank you again. You're all willing to share your company's operations and future planning around what's going on. I know some of it's sensitive, and we're certainly all trying to find a positive outcome in this. We've had, again, what Aerospace try to do is we're trying to push out more of a supply chain town hall, right? And I think it's something that oftentimes supply chain's overlooked, but right now there's a key laser focus on it. We've had close, for the audience there and for the panelists, we've had close to 1,000 registrants for these town halls. So even though we know that a lot of people are talking individually, I think this is a great forum for those folks who are joining today. They're looking for, am I thinking about things the right way? Are there areas that I need to be thinking about differently? And are there hopefully things that you're going to walk away with today in terms of, have I learned something new or reconfirmed something that I'm doing, whether it be from an operator perspective, whether it be from a distributor or supplier. And we have the entire supply chain represented on the panel today, as well as the registrants that are participating. So with that, what we did is we actually did a pre-town hall survey. And what you can see here again, we're ultimately a data information company on top of how we render it, but for us, it's about gathering information from our customers, from participants. And so this was sent out to many of you that are on the call today. And this is a rank order of areas that were most concerning, right, in terms of things that people were thinking about today. Restaurant operation changes, right? How are menus and LTO and ordering procedures being accommodated? And those are things that we have to think about right now. Supplier operation changes, as David referenced earlier. Obviously, there was a little bit of a panic this week with some information that went out about the food supply chain being in danger, right? So that's timely. Logistics and freight, Kevin, as you would imagine, and we're thankful to have you here on the panel today. Certainly, that continues to be an ever ongoing saga in terms of the way our customers are thinking about stuff, as well as our distribution partners. Finished product supplies. Brian, that's, obviously plays right into some things that you guys are thinking about. I think our customers are trying to figure out, what is it going to look like? How's the according effect going to hurt or help the supply chain? And how do I collaborate better with my suppliers and distributors? Raw materials, customer supplier collaboration were up there as well. Again, I think we were surprised at how close. There wasn't any clear winners that just shot out above it. So it just tells us that people are still trying to keep all of these things in mind as they go through it. So David covered one of them. We're going to cover about 6 of these topics today through some of the data that we're pulling here in Aerostream, and then relate it to how Megan, yourself, and Keith, and Brian, and Kevin are all leveraging some of this as we go, as we move week to week. So let's start with the restaurant operation changes. So we can see from our data and tile usage that inventory has been a key component. I think from day one, we saw that increase start to take off around March 8th. And as you can see through the stats that we're pulling from our system, we're able to see all of our customer usage across our entire platform. And so what this is indicating is that customers view inventory as probably the #1 aspect that they're checking every day. We have a lot of customers that are single source distribution. We have a lot of customers that have multiple distribution centers. And so they're wanting to know in a consolidated alert format fashion, what do I need to plan for today? Where am I going to be out of product? Or more importantly now, where am I planning to get new product? I think I brought up that we actually saw a customer yesterday that has 100% of their stores closed, but they're starting to look at their inventory now because they want to get ahead, and they have some stores out of Atlanta, and so they're looking in the Atlanta market to say, where do I need to order product? How do I need to get my distribution centers collaborating with me on that? How do I need to let my suppliers know that this product's going to start to ramp back up? So I think where I'd like to start is the big question today is with Georgia and Texas reopening. Megan, Keith, we'll start with you two. Megan, how are you guys planning for this? How are you looking at Georgia in terms of the Shacks reopening? And then Keith, will transition to you, and then we'll get some feedback from Kevin and Brian as well.
Yeah, so we actually didn't fully close any of our Georgia restaurants. We stayed open for delivery and takeout. Even with Georgia reopening, we've made the decision not to open our dining rooms just yet because we're not in a place where we're comfortable enough with opening our dining rooms. But that being said, we still do expect a pretty large increase in sales on the takeout side, given that people are going to be out more frequently and going to restaurants. So with that being said, our team is working on making sure that we have enough inventory, especially on all of our proprietary items at our distributor partner, while also working with our suppliers directly to ensure that they're aware of that increased usage and that they are going to ramp up and be able to support that increased demand in Georgia.
Okay. Keith?
Yeah, and I would, from Arby's perspective, we're taking a pretty measured approach to reopening the dining rooms. Fortunately, we've been able to transition most of that volume through the drive-through window over the last 3 weeks. So we want to, when we do open the dining rooms back up, make sure we're doing it efficiently and safely as well for both our employees and our guests. The biggest challenge we're hearing out there, obviously, from operators is getting the additional labor required to open the dining rooms. Many of the employees, have gotten their checks, and so just trying to get them back in, get retrained on the new process procedures. Arby's has published out to our operators a very detailed reopening plan. It includes what PPE will look like in the future, from gloves, masks, sanitizer, all those important customer interface touch points. Our franchisees do have the ability to, move a little quicker if they'd like. But like I said, right now we're taking a very conservative approach to getting those dining rooms back open.
That's great. Kevin, from a PFG perspective, how are you guys working, with your customers in these states that are reopening, and how are you guys rethinking it?
Yeah, and great points from Keith and from Megan. Just, when states are reopening, and depending on the guidance, I've seen 33% or 25% of occupancy. PPE is very critical, and we've been having those discussions internally as well as for our protection of our associates, but certainly from a customer perspective, because it looks like all these guidelines will include quite a bit with PPE. So we're actually trying to get that sourced out. We've worked with some of our brands, going back 3 or 4 weeks as we tried to source some of this, knowing that once the states allow the brands to reopen the dining room, this is going to be a big part of it. But really the critical thing right now is communication. Because in some cases, certainly Keith talked about it, Megan, with, the drive-through or the delivery side of it has really kind of helped, close the gap from sort of a pre-COVID. But so when opening the dining room may have a big impact, it may not, but the most important thing is communicating, because as much time as it took us to get to this new inventory levels in the distribution side, it's going to take equally that amount of time to get back to pre-levels. So it's about sort of a staggered buildup of inventory as we support these states reopening.
Great, thanks, Kevin. Brian, some input from you, please.
Yeah, we're working daily with our customers, trying to understand where we operate nationwide. So we're trying to figure out who's opening, when it's opening, how does the different market segments are affected, whether it be fast casual, fine dining, casual dining, quick service, to understand what their demand's going to be, and and how we can support that. It's a little bit easier if you're dealing with frozen product, but if you're dealing with a fresh commodity like chicken, it can get a little bit dicey when you're trying to figure out on the operator side and the distributor side and throughout the supply chain how to handle that when you really don't know when and where your sales are going to come from.
So one of the things that we certainly hear a lot of right now is around SKU reductions and menu simplicity. Keith, Megan, are you guys evaluating that right now? And how are you thinking about that in terms? And then Kevin, this also filters over to obviously distribution, and Brian, you as well, but we've definitely seen supply chain teams really starting to think about what are my top 25, 50, 100 items that I know I'm going to have to carry and sell. And so, there's a whole trickle down effect or trickle up effect of not just managing to that menu the products, but maybe rethinking about, product positioning at the distributor and how that affects the supplier. So Keith, maybe you can highlight something on that.
No, absolutely. When this first hit, our mode was definitely more of that sort of hurricane national disaster kind of approach. So we have a list of what we consider core items or core SKUs to support a limited menu should a natural disaster happen. Our focus was make sure we have those items in stock in the warehouses and in our stores. We pretty quickly pivoted to understanding that, hey, this was not a we're gonna not have product kind of situation. So the menu rationalization sort of slowed down from that respect. We never enacted a reduced menu at all. And throughout this process, what we have done is, from a marketing perspective, tried to really focus on more core type items. We've pushed out some LTOs to a little bit later in the year. One is to help our operators continue to execute. This was a whole new game plan for them, a shift to all drive-through. And so we wanted them focusing on that service and get the speed required to still handle the volume. But also, just quite honestly, the media spend and the amount of money spent on media, a lot of questions of how effective was it really going to be? Was it worth promoting a new item to try to drive business when people are even concerned about getting out anyway? So we peeled back a lot of the spend in that area to bring it back later in the year when we think it could be more effective. So there's a lot of those kind of things that happened that did ultimately affect some timing on some LTO products and SKUs that were in development. None of that activity has stopped. We're actually still evaluating new items. We're testing several new items right now in locations for possible menu implementation late this year, even into next year. So that activity is still going on as well.
Right. Thanks, Keith. Megan?
Yeah, so we pretty much followed a very similar model as to what Keith just spoke about. We definitely did simplify some of our menu items. A lot of our locations have menu-specific items that we peeled back, especially with having a limited team at each of the shacks. We tried to really focus on what our core items were and remove some of those items that it didn't really make sense for us to right now have those items in stock and have the team members prepping those items as well. So kind of on the LTO side, what we did was very similar to what Keith said. We put pause on a few LTOs that we had planned in the pipeline for the next couple of months, just really kind of moving things around. We're also still continuing to innovate. It's at the core of what our business is. We're a culinary driven company, so we will continue to innovate, and there will be many LTOs to come once this all subsides and as things are back to normal.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. Kevin, on your side, on PFG side, one of the things that has been coming up also is just the amount of non-proprietary product that you stock in general. So, one example somebody gave us was, a distributor may carry 12 turkey meats now, but now they're going to start to narrow that down to maybe just 2. Do you guys anticipate any shifts in how you buy and source product at the distributor level and offer the non-proprietary items to your customers?
Yeah, there's probably a big chance for that long term. I think short term, the intent will be to get the brand back up to speed as fast as possible, understanding their existing supply chain. Long term, there's always an opportunity. It certainly fits within the core strategy of what we try to do with existing customers. But really, when you look at emerging markets where you don't have the density, where that may be the biggest opportunity, where having discussion with the supply chain teams about, they're not able to buy correctly, we're having to either go through redistribution. So long term, I think we'll see more pressure from the distribution community to use more items that we stock that may not have it may actually have a 10-year supply chain, but it may not be specific to the R&D or specific to that brand. So I think you'll see a lot more of that in the future.
Okay, great. Brian, I've got some questions for you on this next topic. So let's transition now to one of the other items on the poll that we sent out, and it was around the supplier and distribution changes. So one of the things that obviously that everybody knows and what we saw was radical shifts in the ordering patterns in terms of just erratic demand pulls and challenges at the supplier plants. In March, for example, we saw closely to 365 million orders canceled, which is probably not a surprise to a whole lot of folks. But we have seen that taper off here in April down to close to 200 million. So it does look like the purchase order cancellations, and Keith and Megan, you have both brought up, a lot of that has just shifted, but it does look like it's starting to come back down. So I think that's a good indicator of some of the reopenings and some of the stability in terms of ordering. So Brian, outside of, and this would be for you, so outside of the daily communications with your customers, what are you guys doing to brace for this and the pattern of suppliers closing for short periods of time right now? So how are you guys thinking, not just short term, but long term on how to manage through some of these order cancellations or extended orders?
Yeah, we've been working a lot on trying to figure out what the mix is. We saw customers across our customer base go anywhere from down 80% to down 10% throughout this crisis. And now on the flip side, we're seeing customers over the last week or so be up 20 to 30% over pre-COVID levels. So we're really having to work on, how do we balance out our supply chain, because we're dealing with a live animal that takes a certain amount of time to grow. And during the period of all the cutbacks or the cancellations, we had a lot of product that was either unsold or had to be sold in a different form than what we're used to. So we're trying to pivot as fast as we can to meet the customers' needs. And a lot of times our customers don't know when their business is going to be up, and that's a challenge as well. So we're working throughout that with our distributor partners and all of our customers.
Thank you, Brian. David, a question just came in for you. It says, how do you expect the protein plant closures to impact supply and pricing over the next few months?
Yeah, so again, I think that we're probably the worst of this is going to be during the next 4 to 6 weeks. We've got beef prices at record highs right now. We got pork prices jumping. Pork prices are likely to continue to go higher. We're seeing signs that not as many disruptions around poultry or chicken, but we're seeing signs that chicken producers are pulling back some on output. So I think poultry is going to go higher over the next few months. Beef is an uncharted territory right now. I think that we're starting to see shipments decline as far as orders decline. So it would not surprise me if we're somewhat close to a top in beef, in over the next week, 2 or 3. And then maybe that demand starts shifting more to poultry, which, Brian, hopefully you'll like, right?
Yeah, I'm going to be in big trouble if there's a run on meat. So, hey, David, thanks for that. Thanks for continuing to stay on top of that. So I do have a question. So this leads into some of the logistics and freight in this area as well. So we had a lot of questions again around distribution and from a supplier perspective as well. So Kevin, I think some of the things that come up is sometimes in a crisis, we see a crisis as a catalyst, right, for change in the industry, whether it be more timely information in the supply chain, ordering patterns, SKU rationalization. Where would you want to see a change right now or make an effect as one of the top distributors in the U.S.?
That's a loaded question, but certainly tapping in on the last discussion, SKU rationalization is pretty critical. I know that in the previous question, Megan and Keith talked about sort of limiting LTO, but if you go back over the last couple of years, looking at sort of the restaurant industry, maybe an oversaturation of brick and mortar, certainly a lot of competition. Well, that's created is a lot of brands to try to speed a market with additional LTOs and different items like that. So we've been choked up quite a bit with inventory and different promotions, and so SKU rationalization would be a big win for distribution.
That's great. No, thank you. What about the other big thing that we saw was around buying in brackets, drop sizes, and frequency of deliveries. Are you clearly you guys are being affected by that as well? How are you working with your customers to help manage some of that? Because obviously we're seeing that, and then Megan, I'd love you and Keith's take on some of that. Go ahead, Kevin.
Yes. So coming earlier, so just as Brian said, he's seeing some declines from 80% to 10% to even 30% increases. So in a lot of cases, we got down to sort of this new normal, and I use normal sort of quote unquote because it changes every day, that where we feel like we're in a good position to support that brand, whether it be the number of deliveries a week, the number of items you're able to bring in. And so we're adjusting as the customers are adjusting, whether it's stimulus check driven or customers just wanting to get out and try and get to some additional food through the restaurant industry. So we are trying to adjust as we know it. And so really even going back to one of my first comments, as states come out of this CV-19, it's communication. It's working together. We in a lot of cases our drop sizes are cut in half or have been greatly reduced, and our costs do not change. We still pay the same tolls, we still have the same fees. So, but we're working with our customers, knowing that they didn't create the situation, we certainly did it. How can we work together to make sure that we're giving you what you need when you need it? So we're working with everybody.
Great, Megan, how are you guys managing through some of that?
Yeah, so obviously our deliveries from our distributor partner have been greatly reduced since this all started. I think the biggest thing is communication with your locations and being open and honest with them and letting them know this is the situation that our distributor is in, pretty much in the same place as they are. How can we work together to make sure that we're both in a good place and have enough inventory at our locations to service our guests? So it's really just making sure that we're communicating with our restaurants and making sure they're aware of the situation. But our distributor has been great and has worked with us on if we need extra deliveries, they're working with us to get them. And if in a situation they can't, we're lucky enough that our locations are all corporate owned. So transferring product between stores has been pretty easy for us to do, other than our managers having to drive around, but they've been getting it done as needed.
Great. Thank you for that. So let's transition now to another topic that was important to everybody, was new business partner opportunities. So obviously we continue to track supplier collaboration and look through the data in terms of what it's telling us on activity levels. And so we're looking at, we constantly get asked about distributors that are already connected to our platform. And can we provide, that can provide PO and inventory data. I think what's interesting on this one in the finished product supplies is just the amount of products that we see being pushed in for substitutions right now. And so I know there's been obviously a lot of leeway given for that. We saw some signals early on that a lot of, Keith, and I think you alluded to this a little bit earlier, that product substitutions, you guys are you didn't want to stop the ordering, you want to keep your menu as whole as possible. And we are seeing a lot of distributors that are able to substitute good product. One of the questions that came out of this here around substitution was raw material shortages are down the road. Growers and producers are going to shift out of items that are oversupplied right now. As the economy recovers, items like produce, proteins require a longer period of ramp up time. And Brian, you alluded to this a little bit earlier. Will there likely be supply and pricing issues or pricing increases since nobody really knows how fast everything will ramp up again? Brian, that was directed towards you, that question.
Yeah, I think it's really too early to tell how this is all going to shake out, because we're all dealing with a new normal. I think that every supplier right now is looking, because all of them don't operate all across all channels of the business. And if you have entities in your company that operate in retail, you're doing really well. If you have other opportunities in the deli arena or other places, you're not doing so well. You're starting to see that come back. But I think that there will be some challenges on certain items moving forward in the next few months as both customers and suppliers figure out what the new normal is. And if I had a crystal ball, I probably wouldn't be here. I'd be doing something else. But my crystal ball has been fuzzier and fuzzier. It seems like over the last month.
Sure. Sure. And again, we certainly see that. I think we had a discussion with a customer the other day that said they didn't realize how many items they're starting to buy now. So Kevin, I know you're probably seeing some of that. I know our customers are certainly seeing that as well. And you can see through this graph that we're certainly signaling that more and more items are just, customers are going outside of their contracts to look for products. So again, our intent is, as we do these town halls, to keep providing not just a great panel, but information that Airstream can provide. And so what we're hoping is that at the end of this month and in May, we'll start to see some of that trend line start to graph back down in terms of substitutions and things that are going on within the supply chain. So we've got about 4 minutes left. I want to move on just to new business partnership opportunities. Again, I think there's always an opportunity and a catalyst point, and certainly COVID has been a catalyst for a lot of our customers. Megan, I know you're doing some mitigation strategies with suppliers. You want to talk about how, because you guys do a lot of local, and I know you have a really interesting supplier strategy. You want to talk a little bit about what you guys are doing around that right now?
Yeah, so really right now we have a lot of local partners that we work with, local bakeries to all sorts of different suppliers. What we're kind of finding right now is with what's going on, a lot of them have closed their doors as well. So what we've been doing is just removing those items from those menus at the location so that we're not making it available to the consumer, so that the Shack doesn't need to prepare that item. They don't need to bring in another SKU. We're really trying to keep it tight to just those core items that we get from our distributor partner.
That's great. Keith, what are you guys doing around this area?
Yeah, we don't source quite as much locally as Megan does, but I think I totaled up, we've had to bring on 6 new supply partners into our system in the last 4 weeks. Most of those are related to PPE type products. We're all dealing with items and categories we never really had to worry about before, and suddenly they're critical to maintaining, keeping your doors open. So whether that's gloves, that's chemicals to masks, and now we're even toilet paper. Who would ever thought that, right? So a lot of activity around that, and we actually utilize the Airstream tool quite frequently as we were sourcing, seeing who else was out there on some of these products. Back to sort of SKU rationalization and data visibility. One thing, we're learning using the system and working with our distribution partners. A lot of these items, I'm going to use an example of, let's use vinyl gloves as an example. Some of those items were not slotted and skewed specifically for Arby's. At the warehouses, they're slotted as a sort of a shared item that supplier might have multiple customers out of that warehouse. And however, we all have our own individual contracts. And, when things started happening, we got supply commitments from those suppliers. And however, when it hits the warehouse, we sort of lose visibility into how much of that is Arby's, how much is somebody else's, and is everybody getting their right share. So to Kevin's point earlier, I actually see a need ultimately to maybe create more slots, unfortunately, for the same item across customers, unless we, through technology and other things, find a way to better, manage customer specific product within that SKU. But
Sure.
So those are the kind of things we're dealing with, and but it's a continues to evolve. suppliers, our distribution partners have been absolutely great to work with. We understand the challenges that, Kevin mentioned. Our orders have been fluctuating quite dramatically from the stores, and our DC partners have worked to do that, manage that effectively. We do see a lot more hand holding with the distributors. We're reviewing a lot more POs in detail than we had been in the past, and that's strictly a function of our volume fluctuations as well as DC resources. Some of them don't have the personnel that they might have had previously for whatever reason, so trying to help them through this as well.
That's great. So we're running up to the end of the time, but I'll tell you what, we're going to keep this open at the Q&A because I've got about 4 or 5 questions that have popped up. So we'd love to just keep this open and have you folks answer a few questions that are coming in from the audience right now. We did make this for 45 minutes. We did an hour last time. Obviously, there's been a lot of good content and questions have been coming in. So I'm going to ask just folks that are online that we're going to keep this open for 15 more minutes, and we'll get through some of these questions that have just popped up. So Megan, I know that one of the things that came up earlier that we talked about, and this showed up again, was around brand loyalty. I think in our last webinar, town hall that we talked about, it was, customers were just focused on key items, and it was interesting to see with Einstein, for example, they were starting to see a pickup on some new customers. We've also talked to other customers this week where they're hoping to see a shift in maybe some new customer pickup that maybe have never been exposed to their brands before. And so I know you had some interesting thoughts on some brand loyalty around product that you're seeing at Shake Shack that you wanted to elaborate on. Could you answer or give some thoughts on that?
Yeah, of course. Definitely during this whole process, we found that making our product available amongst a bunch of different platforms was going to be the key to success during this. Prior to the pandemic hitting, we were only available on one delivery platform. In the past few weeks, we've reintegrated with a bunch more delivery platforms, making us available to a more wide audience, which has really helped us to succeed and gain more sales and traction during this. In addition to that, we also launched an at-home meal kit, which you can buy online, which has helped us greatly as well. So it's kind of just making sure that you can get your product across to many different people, and exposing your product through different channels so that people can have the access to buy your product. And for us, that's really been our key to success over the past few weeks and has definitely helped us to start to work back up on our sales.
Okay, no, that's great. Keith, you obviously opened up an interesting topic. So we just got another question that said, expanding on Keith's point regarding stock, and this is for maybe Kevin. How do distribution partners plan to manage that inventory that Keith was just talking about?
Sorry, Kevin.
Kevin?
Yeah. So certainly to respond to that, we've been reacting, on a daily basis. Again, I think the stimulus checks certainly have pushed the consumer out to make more restaurant stops, and the communication's just critical. That we can know, but we have leadership calls on a daily basis. We review the different regions, how they're performing versus prior week. We've certainly followed, the different guidelines through CDC, but again, we haven't stopped working. In fact, the work has really almost been twice as much as we've tried to help brands sort of reinvent themselves. Certainly what Megan talked about, and a lot of brands, there's the creativity that's come out of this with what some concepts are doing is amazing. And whether it be through ghost kitchens or doing different marketing, advertising. So it's every day we're working on inventory and working with that brand to understand sort of what the challenges are today and what the challenges are going to be tomorrow. So it's an ongoing basis.
Oh, that's great. Another question that came in is, how are restaurants expecting to address self-serve beverages when dining rooms open?
Well, I'll speak to what I know on that so far. For at least initially, we're going to keep our beverage station closed, along with our condiment stand. at least through phase 1, and then even probably our phase 2 of a dining room opening. So those beverages will still be handed out from behind the counter. And that's as much just, we're not sure consumers want to use them initially. So that's our game plan for the time being.
Okay. Another question that came out was, and Keith, you addressed a little bit of this earlier, but I do wonder if it's going to become a more serious problem in the coming weeks. We're seeing a concern about the labor force. I am going to, there's somebody wrote and said that, so we're thinking about our strategy right now on how to get employees back to work to ensure that they're in a safe environment. So you have two issues, right? One, you have customers wanting to come in knowing that they're in a fairly sanitized and safe environment. But I guess from a supply chain perspective, and from whether it be an operator, distributor, or supplier, Brian, how are you guys concerned about that, the labor aspect? Megan, maybe start with you. Sorry, Keith, because you kind of.
I'll jump in. I know, as I alluded to earlier, it is a concern we have. And it's a fact of, our employees that might have been furloughed at a restaurant level or what have you. They're, in some instances they could be taking a pay cut when they come back to work with some of the incentives that are out there. So it's that's one concern about getting these employees back in, and then the bigger concern is to making sure they're safe and healthy, and we have a policy in place. Hey, if you're not feeling well, you can call in sick, no questions asked, those kind of things. And that is what should occur, and we're seeing a lot higher incidence of that as well. And I know that is impacting the supplier community, and a lot of our processors have similar policies. And I've heard plants where 50% of the workforce is calling in sick that day. Well, you're not going to get the production out of that facility when half the people show up. So that's going to be, an ongoing concern that we're dealing with as an industry, I think for the next 3 to 4 weeks minimum, until we get a little better handle on where this virus is truly tracking and people feel safe about it.
Okay. Thanks, Keith, for that. Megan, maybe for you, since you guys have a lot of restaurants, in terms of, I think the experience component of people sitting down, thoughts on safety codes for dining in, table distances, taking temps, wearing masks?
Yeah, so our QA team is currently working on what that plan is going to look like. We haven't officially released what our plan is going to be yet. For right now, we're still sticking with takeout and delivery. But as far as rehiring, we've clearly outlined what that process is going to look like, and how that process will work from the Shack's perspective of reaching out to the furloughed employees, and what the training needs to be, and how we need to onboard them, getting them back into the restaurants, as well as making sure that we're reinforcing maximizing hours of current employees that are in the Shack before rehiring furloughed employees. And then also just knowing when to identify it's time to bring in or look for new hires.
Great, thank you. Looking through just a few more questions here, and then we will start to wrap up. I guess, Kevin, you had said something about you're seeing some creative things. So what are some creative solutions that help both supply chain and restaurant partners? Have you guys, any new innovation that you've seen come out of this, or anything interesting that you guys have done that you think's different, or maybe something you wouldn't have done necessarily in the past, but due to the crisis, you either had the opportunity to do it or explore a new way to do something? I would just open that up for anybody on the panel.
I can certainly answer that. From our perspective, the meal kits have been our big innovation that we've done. We're doing them online, as well as testing it out in Northern California through Uber Eats. So you can go ahead and purchase a packet where you can make your own Shack burgers at your house. So that's been our one, I would say, big innovation to address the issues that we're facing right now.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say, more probably for this audience than in the restaurant side, but just the ability to work so effectively remotely has been a big aha moment for a lot of people. We'd always allowed our staff to telecommute 1 day a week prior to this, so we were in that mode a little bit. This obviously took it to a whole new level, but just the amount of engagement we're having is actually more than it was when we were in the office together, and we seem to be a heck of a lot more productive, quite honestly. And so we're trying to brainstorm as a leadership, how do we not lose that when we do physically come back together, because it has worked so effectively. And I think it will open up some minds and that might have not been as open to telecommuting and some other things. I think people are going to learn a lot from this, that it can work and work very effectively. So that's, I think, one of the big learnings we'll take away.
Yeah, that's a great aspect, Keith. So certainly something we continue to focus on here at Airstream to make our solutions more proficient, right, for our customers and easier to use, from whether it be the executive down to the administrator in terms of how they're trying to manage data. That's certainly something that we saw was when these teams went home. For those of you that know me, I've been in the industry for about 20 years and certainly have advocated technology for a long time. And so it'll be interesting to see if there's a catalyst, Keith, coming out of this where people realize now more than ever. I think we talk about collaboration and information, but now you really have a need for it, I think, and it has to be at your fingertips, because we don't have the luxury of just walking down the hall to somebody's office, right, to ask for something. So it'll be interesting to see how the dynamics, I think, change within that. A couple more questions. So random comment, Shake Shack meal kits are great. So Megan, kudos to you. So that just came in. And then there was a quick question around retraining and reorientation. Brian, are you guys do you guys have to do any? I know from the restaurant side, obviously that's a big topic. You guys are having to do a lot of retraining, reorientation. Brian, from a supplier perspective, have you guys thought about, obviously you're doing some retraining now and some safety measures are starting to take place in the supplier plants. Any major shifts or anything that you guys think are innovative that you're doing at the supplier level?
Yeah, I think we're having to retrain our employees on social distancing opportunities. Everything from, hey, you're going to get your temperature done today, to you're going to wear a mask at work, to just some of the, in the break room, we're practicing social distancing. We're adding plexiglass everywhere you can. But I think that's just going to be the new normal. And, as we work with customers and innovating upstream, I think across the industry, operators are probably going to look at the opportunity to, if they're doing something in-house, maybe with less labor, how do they take that upstream, not just to a chicken supplier, but to a sauce supplier or somebody else, and help them figure that out so that they don't have to use as much labor in the restaurant.
Makes sense. Kevin, on the distributor side, I know you guys are faced with that every day and how you're thinking about your operations.
Yeah, absolutely. And we follow CDC guidelines. We're certainly looking at sort of the new normal as we bring more folks back to support the restaurants as they come back on with their dining rooms. So yeah, absolutely. We're looking at sort of the layouts, the break rooms, the shift meetings, the exercising, how they work with other associates. So it's part of our landscape on how we go forward. Absolutely.
Sure. Well, no doubt there's going to continue to be a lot of changes and shifts in terms of how people operate, how the businesses operate. First, thank you all for spending an extra 15 minutes with us today. Coming out of this, just so everybody knows it's on the call today, obviously we have seen a massive uptick in terms of how our applications are leveraging and being leveraged by our customers. So thank you guys for participating in the panel today. With that said, we're actually, Airstream is going to come out in the next couple of weeks with a inventory quick start program for those people that are non-customers of Airstream currently. We've actually enabled a component of our application around inventory that we can start up for customers that will help you plan for your store reopenings, manage inventory disruptions. It's alert-based, and it essentially will take your distributor information, both from a PO, sales, and inventory perspective, and consolidate that and allow you to manage that in a near real-time environment. So we're excited to be launching a new component of our product out to the marketplace. We will be doing some follow-up with everybody on that this week. And again, as always, we're here to help, so certainly engage with us at Airstream. You can email us anything. We will be sending, I think, this presentation out to folks and some follow-ups. Kevin, Megan, Brian, David, and Keith, thank you all so much for participating today. As always, we love our customers. We wish you guys the best success, and we're thankful to be part of this as we move forward. So you guys have a great rest of the week. Thank you for all the attendees for hanging in there with us. And I really appreciate everybody sending in a lot of questions today. We'll be doing this again soon, so stay tuned for that. Have a great week.
Thank you.